When you push this boundary, when you rise beyond the patterns that once defined you, something extraordinary happens. Not just in your relationships, but within you. Because the truth is, love thrives in environments of strength, clarity, and emotional certainty. And the avoidant, the one who fears closeness, the one who flinches at vulnerability, they don't fall in love with pressure. They fall in love with presence. You're not here to chase. You're here to become. To embody the kind of grounded power that inspires another person to do what they've never done before. Trust. And trust is the cornerstone of every transformation, especially for someone afraid of being hurt. When you push this boundary of self-respect, when you stretch into a higher standard of emotional leadership, you send a signal, I am safe, I am solid, I am not moved by your fear. And that signal, that steadiness, it melts defenses. It shifts dynamics. It awakens a longing within the avoidant heart, a longing to step closer, to lean in, to share what they've never been able to give. Because the more unwavering you are, the more the avoidant learns that love doesn't demand their surrender. It invites their courage. You become the mirror, reflecting what they've always wanted to believe but were too afraid to try. That connection can feel like freedom, not confinement. That intimacy can feel like oxygen, not pressure. That love can be a sanctuary, not a battlefield. And as you continue standing in your boundaries, not as walls, but as pillars of dignity, you create a spiritual container, strong, steady, and deeply magnetic. This is where transformation happens. When you lead from purpose, when you operate from truth, you illuminate a path they didn't even know existed. You're not just teaching someone how to love you. You're reminding them how to love themselves enough to love with you. So keep rising, keep pushing this boundary, not to change them, but to elevate yourself. Because when you hold the line of your worth, you don't just attract love, you awaken it. Safety creates connection. And when we talk about emotional safety, especially in the context of someone with avoidant tendencies, we're really speaking about the foundation upon which trust, vulnerability, and intimacy are built. An avoidant individual doesn't withdraw because they don't care. They withdraw because their nervous system has been conditioned to believe that closeness equals danger. They've learned, often through childhood experiences or painful relationships, that connection can cost them their autonomy, their identity, or their peace. So when they pull back, it's not rejection, it's protection. This is why emotional safety becomes the anchor. It's the invisible container that allows an avoidant person to slowly, cautiously, and eventually, courageously step toward deeper connection. Emotional safety isn't created through force, pressure, or demands. It emerges through presence, energetic steadiness, and authenticity. It's the invitation you extend when you show that love doesn't have to overwhelm, doesn't have to consume, and doesn't have to imprison. Instead, it can be a space where two people breathe, discover, and evolve together. Many people misunderstand the avoidant attachment style because they assume that the person is cold, detached, or uninterested. But beneath that protective shell is a deeply sensitive individual who feels more than they can comfortably express. They distance themselves not because they are incapable of love, but because they fear being engulfed by it. Their emotional boundaries are rigid because they learned that nobody else would protect them, so they had to protect themselves. The irony is that avoidants often crave connection as much as anyone else. They just don't know how to experience it without feeling threatened. Safety, therefore, becomes the key that unlocks closeness. But what does safety look like? It looks like consistency without suffocation. It looks like listening without trying to fix, control, or interpret. It looks like giving space without withdrawing emotionally. It's the way you regulate your own emotions instead of insisting they manage them for you. It's the way you show up with honesty but without intensity, with clarity but without confrontation. Safety is created when you honor your boundaries while respecting theirs. It's the calm presence you bring into the relationship that communicates you're free to be yourself. Here. No pressure, no expectation, no demand. An avoidant person doesn't fall in love with chaos. They fall in love with certainty. When they experience you as someone who doesn't push past their limits, someone who doesn't require instant intimacy, someone who doesn't panic when they take space, they begin to feel something rare, relief. Relief that they don't have to perform, relief that they don't have to run, relief that connection doesn't require sacrificing who they are. This sense of safety slowly rewires their attachment patterns. They start associating relationships with comfort instead of anxiety. They begin to believe that closeness doesn't always lead to loss. And this shift isn't minor, it's monumental, because when an avoidant person feels safe, they begin to reveal themselves in ways they've never allowed. They share pieces of their inner world, one truth at a time. They initiate conversations, they express needs, they show affection, they let you see the parts they've hidden from everyone else. And the beauty of it is this: the more consistently you provide that emotional safety, not by shrinking yourself, but by standing in your grounded, self-led energy, the more the avoidant discovers that love is not a threat, but a sanctuary. Emotional safety becomes the soil in which your connection takes root. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens through patient presence, through the energy of non-judgment, through the quiet power of someone who understands that real love isn't rushed. It's allowed. Boundaries build respect, and when you're dealing with someone who leans avoidant, this principle becomes even more powerful. People often misunderstand boundaries as walls that separate or create distance, but in reality, boundaries are expressions of self-worth. They communicate what you will allow, what you won't tolerate, and how you expect to be treated. They are not weapons, they declarations of value. And when an avoidant person encounters someone who holds their boundaries with clarity and calm confidence, something within them shifts. They begin to feel safe, not pressured. They begin to feel respect, not fear. They begin to recognize strength where others have shown only emotional volatility. Avoidant individuals are highly sensitive to emotional chaos. They retreat the moment they sense controlling behavior, desperation, or neediness, because to them those qualities signal danger. They interpret boundaryless behavior as potential entanglement. But when you stand firmly in your truth, not as a demand, but as a standard, you communicate that you don't need to control them to feel secure. This is where respect is born. Respect doesn't come from chasing, convincing, or overgiving. It comes from self-possession, from demonstrating that your sense of identity is not contingent on their approval, presence, or attention. When you articulate your boundaries in a grounded way, without anger, without dramatics, without ultimatums, you show that you are emotionally mature and self-led. You become someone who is not afraid to walk away from disrespect, misalignment, or inconsistency. And this energy is magnetic. The avoidant recognizes in you something they may lack in themselves: emotional self-governance. You're not leaning on them to validate your worth. You're standing in it. That posture commands respect at a deep instinctive level because it shows strength without aggression and softness without weakness. Boundaries also create clarity, and clarity brings comfort to someone who often feels overwhelmed by emotional complexity. When you're clear about what you need, what you accept, and how you operate, the avoidant doesn't have to guess. They don't have to decode mixed signals or navigate emotional turbulence. They know where you stand. They know what you honor. And this reduces fear because uncertainty is what triggers their defenses most. Boundaries, therefore, become a map, not just for the relationship, but for how to connect with you without losing themselves. A powerful boundary communicates, I honor myself, and I invite you to honor me too. It's not a punishment if they fail, it's simply a reflection of what you're unwilling to compromise. When you follow through consistently, not bending out of fear, not collapsing to maintain connection, you teach the avoidant that love can coexist with individuality. That closeness doesn't require invasion. That intimacy doesn't require sacrifice of identity. And this revelation is profound for someone who has built their emotional world around the fear of losing autonomy. The moment an avoidant senses that you will not abandon yourself for the relationship, that you will not overreach, cling, or entangle, they begin to relax. Respect grows in the presence of stability. Admiration grows in the presence of self-respect. And love grows in the presence of emotional integrity. When they see that your boundaries remain intact even when emotions run high, they start to trust your leadership. They start to depend on your consistency. They start to feel drawn toward the very connection they once feared. Holding boundaries is not about getting the avoidant to change. It's about showing up as someone who embodies clarity, dignity, and emotional intelligence. In doing so, you create a relational dynamic where the avoidant can approach you willingly, not fearfully. You transform yourself into a partner they respect because you respect yourself. And in that space of mutual respect, love has room to grow in ways that feel safe, stable, and deeply honoring for both of you. Consistency heals fear, especially for someone who moves through relationships with an avoidant attachment pattern. Avoidant individuals often live with a deep protective instinct to pull away the moment emotional intensity rises. This is not because they don't care, but because they've learned, usually early in life, that connection can be unpredictable, overwhelming, or even unsafe. Their core fear is not intimacy itself, it's the potential chaos that intimacy might bring. This is why consistency becomes such a powerful antidote. It soothes the nervous system, reassures the heart, and lowers the defenses that keep them emotionally distant. Consistency is not just about predictable behavior, it's about energetic steadiness. It's about showing up in a way that communicates reliability and emotional balance. When you are consistent, you send a message, you can relax. You know who I am today, and you'll know who I am tomorrow. For someone accustomed to emotional volatility or inconsistency from others, this becomes deeply healing. It provides a stable rhythm in a world that often felt unsafe or uncertain. The avoidant starts to learn, slowly but profoundly, that they don't have to armor themselves around you. Your steadiness is not just comforting, it's disarming. Each time you respond thoughtfully, instead of react impulsively, you offer reassurance. Each time you honor your word, you demonstrate stability. Each time you handle conflict with maturity instead of intensity, you weaken the association between closeness and danger. Avoidants are not afraid of love. They are afraid of the instability they associate with love. So when you bring consistent behavior, consistent energy, and consistent communication, you begin to unwire their fear at its root. Consistency also demonstrates emotional leadership. In a world where so many people act from wounded impulses, pulling, pushing, demanding, withdrawing, you become an anchor. This kind of grounded presence speaks louder than words. It shows that you are in control of yourself, not of them. That you are trustworthy not because you promise it, but because you live it. The avoidant learns to rely on your steadiness as evidence that connection doesn't have to be chaotic. They begin to associate your presence with calm instead of stress. It's important to understand that avoidant individuals often expect relationships to destabilize. They've been conditioned to believe that intimacy eventually leads to loss of self, conflict, or disappointment. When they see that you don't shift with every emotional wave, that you don't turn reactive when they need space, that you don't crumble under pressure, you defy their expectations. This is where healing begins. They don't feel cornered. They don't feel overwhelmed. They feel seen. And more importantly, they feel safe enough to stay. Consistency also builds emotional momentum. Each positive interaction, each moment of predictability, each instance of calm communication creates a cumulative effect. Over time, these experiences help the avoidant internalize a new narrative. This relationship won't hurt me. This person is stable. This connection is manageable. I can open up here. The defenses they once clung to start to loosen. The emotional distance they maintained begins to shrink. And without pressure, without force, without manipulation, they lean in. The more consistent you are, not perfect but grounded, the more the avoidant begins to trust their own emotional responses. They feel safer expressing needs, safer revealing emotions, safer taking steps toward closeness they once avoided. And the transformation happens not because you chased them, but because you offered something they never experienced consistently before. Stability without strings, presence without pressure, and love without chaos. Your consistency becomes the lighthouse in their internal storm. A steady glow that says, you're safe here. And in that safety, fear loses its grip, and real connection finally has space to grow. Self-mastery attracts at a level far deeper than charm, beauty, or even compatibility. When you center yourself emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, you become a presence that feels steady, grounded, and unmistakably powerful. For someone with avoidant tendencies, someone who is deeply sensitive beneath their guarded exterior, this kind of internal stability becomes irresistible. It draws them in, not through pressure but through resonance. It creates a space where they feel safe enough to lean closer because your energy doesn't invade or overwhelm, it invites and inspires. Avoidant individuals instinctively pull away from anything that feels chaotic or emotionally unpredictable. They aren't comfortable navigating intense emotions, either their own or someone else's. When you operate without self-mastery, when your moods fluctuate wildly, when you project insecurity or make them responsible for your emotional needs, their defenses activate. They retreat. But the moment they sense that you lead yourself, your feelings, your reactions, your inner world, they feel something they rarely feel in relationships: relief. relief that they don't have to manage you, relief that they don't have to save you from your own spirals, relief that they can simply be without constant emotional expectation. Self-mastery is not about suppression. It's about regulation. It's the ability to understand your feelings without becoming consumed by them. It's the skill of responding with intention instead of reacting with impulse. It's the maturity to honor your needs without demanding that someone else fix them. When you embody this level of inner leadership, you create a resonance of emotional safety that an avoidant person finds profoundly comforting. They can relax in the presence of someone who is not ruled by fear, insecurity, or volatility. Avoidants crave a partner who doesn't lose themselves in the relationship. They want someone who remains grounded in their identity, their purpose, their passions. When you demonstrate that your world is full with your mission, your growth, your spirituality, your values, you show them that you're not looking to be completed. You're looking to connect, and this distinction is everything. While many people chase an avoidant hoping for closeness, the person who stands anchored in their own life becomes magnetic, not because they are withholding, but because they're whole. Wholeness is attractive because it doesn't suffocate, it doesn't cling, it doesn't demand reassurance or constant validation. Wholeness creates spaciousness in the connection, a sense that the relationship can breathe. An avoidant person feels safe approaching someone who has not abandoned themselves. They feel drawn to a partner who embodies strength without rigidity and softness without instability. They are pulled towards someone who knows who they are and moves through the world with intention. Self-mastery also creates emotional predictability. When your internal world is ordered, your external behavior becomes consistent. You communicate clearly. You set expectations calmly. You move with purpose rather than panic. An avoidant person reading your energy doesn't feel ambushed by unexpected emotions or unclear signals. Instead, they recognize a stable foundation, something they've longed for but rarely trusted. What makes this so transformative is that an avoidant's deepest fear is losing themselves in a relationship. But when they see you so deeply rooted in your identity, your values, your mission, they realize they won't have to sacrifice who they are to be close to you. Your self-possession gives them permission to maintain their individuality. And because you model this balance between connection and autonomy, they slowly learn to mirror it. Self-mastery is also deeply inspiring. It awakens a desire within the avoidant to grow, to evolve, to rise. Not because you force them, but because your presence reflects what is possible when someone commits to their own evolution. You become a lighthouse, not a lifeboat. You don't rescue them, you illuminate a path. And this creates a relational dynamic rooted not in fear, but in mutual respect and personal expansion. In the end, self-mastery doesn't just attract an avoidant. It awakens the part of them that longs to love without losing themselves. It draws them not by need, but by admiration. It invites them not by pressure, but by possibility. It makes them fall not into fear, but into connection. Space allows growth. And when you're relating to someone with avoidant tendencies, this becomes one of the most powerful truths you can embody. Avoidant individuals have a heightened sensitivity to feeling overwhelmed, intruded upon, or emotionally engulfed. Their instinct is to protect themselves by withdrawing, sometimes physically, often emotionally. This retreat isn't a rejection of you, it's a preservation of themselves. But when you understand that space is not a threat but a tool, you begin to create an environment where connection can actually deepen instead of collapse. Space, when offered consciously, becomes a form of respect. It acknowledges the avoidant's need to breathe, to recalibrate, to process emotions at a pace that feels safe for them. It says, I honor your rhythm. I trust your process. When you allow this space without panicking, without taking it personally, without reacting with insecurity or abandonment wounds, something profound happens. The avoidant begins to feel emotionally safe. They realize they can step back without losing the relationship, and that sense of freedom becomes the foundation where trust can grow. Most people misunderstand space. They think giving space means disconnecting, withholding, or pretending not to care. But conscious space is different. It's spaciousness without withdrawal. It's presence without pressure. It's remaining anchored, available, and emotionally steady even when the avoidant needs distance. You're not abandoning them. You're allowing them the freedom to self-regulate, knowing your connection does not need to be micromanaged to survive. When the avoidant senses that you don't chase their retreat with desperation or anxiety, they begin to relax. The pressure in the dynamic dissolves. They no longer feel the instinctual need to run because the very thing they feared, being overwhelmed, is no longer present. By giving space, you eliminate the trigger. You help their nervous system unwind. And ironically, the more they feel they can step away safely, the more they come forward willingly. Space also cultivates emotional equilibrium for both people. Avoidants need time to sort their thoughts, understand their feelings, and regain a sense of autonomy. They need to internalize experiences, especially emotional ones, in a slow, steady way. When you respect this process, you create a healthy rhythm of closeness and distance, a natural ebb and flow that mirrors real intimacy. Relationships are not meant to operate in constant closeness. They grow in the dynamic interplay of togetherness and apartness. When both people can move freely within this rhythm, the connection strengthens instead of suffocates. Interestingly, giving space also amplifies your own sense of self. You're no longer clinging for reassurance or trying to manage their responses. You're standing rooted in your own identity, your own life, your own purpose. This grounded posture becomes incredibly attractive to an avoidant, who often admires independence, strength, and emotional self-sufficiency. You signal that you're not dependent on their constant presence for stability, and that makes the connection feel safer, lighter, and more sustainable. Space also creates curiosity. When you don't overwhelm an avoidant with constant communication or emotional intensity, you give them room to feel your absence, not in a punishing way, but in a natural, healthy way. They begin to think about you. They wonder how you're doing. They reflect on the connection without feeling cornered by it. This gentle pull often awakens desire and emotional engagement in a way pressure never could. Most importantly, creating space empowers the avoidant to approach the relationship from a place of choice rather than fear. When they return, on their own timing, it's genuine, it's voluntary, it's intentional, and each time they do, their trust in the connection deepens. They learn that love doesn't have to threaten their autonomy. They learn that intimacy doesn't require losing themselves. They learn that closeness and freedom can coexist. Space becomes the bridge between fear and connection. It allows the avoidant to expand, to soften, to open. And through that openness, the relationship grows, not by force, but by alignment. Not through pressure, but through permission. Not because they were chased, but because they were given room to choose you. Authentic power inspires vulnerability, and when you step into a relationship with someone who has avoidant tendencies, this truth becomes a guiding force for transformation. Avoidant individuals are often deeply sensitive, intuitive, and perceptive, even if they rarely show it. They can sense when someone is pretending, performing, or relying on external validation to feel worthy. These behaviors trigger their defenses because they signal instability. But when you stand in your authentic power, your truth, your grounded presence, your inner alignment, you create an energy that feels trustworthy, safe, and deeply compelling. It's the kind of energy that invites an avoidant to slowly, courageously put down their armor. Authentic power isn't loud. It isn't forceful. It isn't controlling. Authentic power is the quiet certainty that comes from knowing who you are and living from that center. It's the confidence that doesn't need to be announced. It's the truth that doesn't need to be proven. It's the steadiness that doesn't waver when emotions rise. When you embody this kind of power, you communicate something that an avoidant rarely experiences: emotional safety without pressure. They feel that you are not trying to extract anything from them. You're not trying to control their reactions, force intimacy, or rush their emotional process. You are simply present, solid, calm, and deeply rooted. This presence inspires vulnerability because it removes the threat. Avoidants often associate vulnerability with loss of control, pain, or entanglement. They fear being engulfed or expected to carry emotional weight they cannot manage. But when your power comes from within, rather than from performing, pleasing, or persuading, you show them that vulnerability can exist without chaos. They begin to understand that opening up doesn't require sacrificing themselves, and that being emotionally available doesn't mean being consumed. Authentic power also communicates emotional responsibility. You aren't asking them to complete you or regulate your feelings. You're not depending on their affection to define your worth. You're not trying to mold the relationship to soothe your insecurities. Instead, you're taking ownership of your emotional world. You're leading yourself. This kind of self-ownership becomes incredibly attractive to an avoidant because it signals maturity, stability, and safety. They see you as someone who can stand strong during emotional storms, someone they can trust with their rawest truths, someone who won't collapse or attack when they open up. Another profound effect of authentic power is that it models what healthy vulnerability looks like. You demonstrate emotional openness without oversharing, honesty without intensity, softness without neediness. This balanced vulnerability allows the avoidant to feel the connection without feeling overwhelmed by it. They can witness your emotional expression and see that it's grounded, intentional, and safe. Over time, this teaches them that vulnerability is not something to fear, but something they can participate in, slowly and at their own pace. Authentic power also eliminates performance dynamics. When you are your true self, your unpolished, honest, integrated self, you give the avoidant permission to drop their own facade. Avoidants often hide behind self-protection, seeming colder or more independent than they truly are. But when they see someone who is unapologetically themselves, who stands in their integrity and doesn't mask or manipulate, they feel a sense of resonance. They feel seen on a level deeper than words. Your authenticity creates an energetic frequency that signals it's safe to be real here. And being real is exactly what the avoidant secretly longs for, but rarely experiences. When you lead with authentic power, you also shift the relational dynamic. Instead of trying to chase or pull them closer, your presence draws them in. You inspire them to grow, not through pressure, but through example. You awaken their desire to be more honest, more open, more emotionally available because your energy makes vulnerability feel like liberation, not a threat. In the end, authentic power becomes the doorway through which the avoidant learns to trust, not because you asked for vulnerability, but because you embodied the safety that made vulnerability possible. You become the person who turns their fear of closeness into curiosity, their hesitation into willingness, and their guarded heart into one that slowly, intentionally chooses to open. Thank you for sharing this journey of growth and understanding with me. Your openness elevates the work we've created together. Goodbye for now, and may your path ahead be filled with clarity, power, and deep, authentic love.